Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we're back talking about the Division Heartland, which you all know is pretty much my favorite topic these days. What I really want to dive into with this one, though, is talk about how Heartland really has kind of a perfect storm being set up for it right now, and I think if Red Storm is able to capitalize on it, it could be a major win and propulsion for the game upon its release. Now, before I fully go into that, I just want to recap a few things that we know are confirmed about the title, and I'm going to leave links for several things in this video down in the description for reference, so go and check there if you're so inclined for more details. But for one, we know that the game is currently slated by Ubisoft for a fiscal 2022 release. This means that its deadline, quote unquote, is by the end of March 2023, in less than 5 months. Now, of course, that could change. Just because it has a fiscal assignment right now does not mean, doesn't guarantee that it couldn't get pushed back. Obviously, it was originally slated for fiscal 2021, and that didn't work out. On the bright side, that previous delay the game received was announced during Ubisoft's Q3 earnings call in 2021, and given that we just had the Q3 call for 2022 a few weeks back and no further delays were mentioned, fingers crossed, that's all I can really say. But on top of that, after the game's reveal at Ubisoft Forward in September, additional articles and details were released online saying that the game is set for a 2022 to 23 release. That clearly indicates that even if it does end up coming out in 2023, Red Storm is nearing completion, and whether it's adding more polish, implementing internal feedback, whatever, you don't float the idea of a 2022 release date when there's only 3 months left in the year if you aren't close to being ready for launch. All of this is to say, I think Heartland is going to hit its fiscal 2022 window. I'm fairly surely certain, which is pretty damn good as far as Heartland is concerned. So like I said, fiscal 2022 ends in under 5 months. For discussion's sake, let's assume Heartland is going to release by then. The question then becomes, what is the most ideal window for them to release it in? What makes the most sense? Well, my friends, this is where we get to that perfect storm I was telling you about. If you're a Division fan in general, which I assume a lot of you are, then you likely saw the big Division 2 news of this past week, that of course being the delays of several upcoming updates and pieces of content, as well as massive publishing a new roadmap of what to expect extending through spring of 2023. In case you missed that, I'll pin it in the upper corner if you want to go and check it out. But while Division 2 is stumbling a bit right now, and a lot of people are disappointed by that, I think it's the first ingredient and factor that's contributing to this perfect storm that's brewing. Regardless of what some may think, I don't believe it's smart to have Division Universe content releasing close to itself, whether it's games launching or post-launch content. Let's say Division 2, Heartland, and Resurgence, once they're all out, all have big updates that are about to release, right? I think you need at least a 2-week gap in between each of those, even if not all of the audience is shared. I just don't think it's smart to create that inter-franchise competition if you can't help it. And on the same note, once all of these titles release, I think it's nothing but genius to try and ensure that each project is releasing stuff in such a cycle that there's continuous Division Universe content releasing throughout the year. Case in point, Division 2 just created a massive gap in Division content releasing. Season 10 and all of its associated stuff is wrapping up in December. Season 11 is now slated for early 2023, but it lost its big piece of content, the Descent game mode. That's now not coming until spring, which I think will likely be around May. So now, after December, the only real thing for Division 2 that will be coming out is the season portion of the Season 11 update, which will have a little bit of an impact, sure, when it drops, for people wanting to scoop up the new items and gear and whatnot, but because Descent has been delayed, that's going to leave you with some very hungry Division fans that want some real content to sink their teeth into, and that's where I think Heartland can really shine. Another factor of this perfect storm that I want to mention is competition outside of the Division. We know from official descriptions that Heartland is being coined as a survival action shooter. That's the genre, right? And that has drawn numerous comparisons to Escape from Tarkov. Now, to say that the two games will be extremely similar, I think we would need more details to really conclude that, but in essence of them both being shooter titles with an emphasis on survival, that seems likely. Well, another game that has been getting big Tarkov comparisons lately is Call of Duty's soon-to-release DMZ mode for Modern Warfare 2. There was some gameplay and a good amount of details released on that this past week, and while I'm not fully versed on it, my summation of it is that it's also a survival action shooter of sorts. It fits in that extraction shooter bill where you've got PvP and PvE, creating that classic PvPvE mix. You've got several squads of players going after similar PvE objectives. That creates opportunities for cooperation, betrayal, general dynamic gameplay scenarios. It sounded like it had potential, and again, similar in genre to the likes of Tarkov and what Heartland seems to be shaping up to be. And within the Division community, I've had a lot of people say to me that they're fully ready to leave the Division and jump on the DMZ train. I've had people tell me how DMZ is going to blow Heartland out of the water, this and that. All of these comments I felt were a bit premature given the very scarce details that were available for either game at the time. Well, fast forward to that event I mentioned where all of this gameplay and these details were released at, and the general consensus from the people who played it, from what I saw, was an overwhelming meh. People didn't hate it. it wasn't not fun, but they felt it lacked a purpose, which honestly doesn't surprise me at all, because one aspect of the survival shooter genre, one aspect that makes games like Tarkov work, is the idea of that long-term persistent progression. When there's different guns and loot and all of the stuff that you can extract, that not only adds stakes, but it gives the players an incentive to keep grinding that meta gameplay loop, right? And again, I don't have all the details. I don't know how COD is necessarily handling all of this, but their formula for the past 15 years has not been loot-based. It's about permanent unlocks. Now, sure, they can put in the work to transition that to a survival shooter genre, but COD is an arcade shooter. My point is, I would see why they would want to try and capitalize on the survival shooter trend right now, but it doesn't surprise me that they're not necessarily hitting the mark. Now, going back to Heartland, obviously we've got some minor gameplay snippets from that reveal trailer. Really, we're gonna have to wait for more to be released or to get a public beta or something of that sort, but guess what? Division has always had survival elements at its core. Go back to that first ever trailer for the game at E3 2013. That had agents looting water and supplies as they moved through the world. Then obviously you had the survival mode in Div 1 after some of those core survival elements got scaled back from the main game. Point is, whereas COD had to do a lot of work to try and transition its arcade shooter roots to fit a survival shooter genre, I imagine Division is going to have very little trouble doing so. And if there are any complaints to be had about Heartland once it releases, I highly doubt they'll be in regards to its core gameplay loop not fitting the survival shooter genre. So then going back to that perfect storm, DMZ was potentially a big competitor and contender for Heartland if it had really knocked it out of the park. It sounds like it's really not going to be, and I've already seen people saying on Twitter, even non-Division fans, that they're excited to see what Heartland has to offer that genre since DMZ has fallen a little flat. Now we'll have to see how much work Activision wants to put in to try and make DMZ a better title within the survival genre. Certainly it's doable, but you also then have the likes of Battlefield 2042 that tried this with Hazard Zone, and they basically just abandoned it once people didn't take to it much. But let's say Infinity Ward does want to try and improve the DMZ experience. That's an uphill battle. That's one that's going to take time not only to implement the changes, but to get the word of mouth going to get people to come back and try it once they get turned off by the first impressions. All of that time just waiting, open for Heartland to come along and capitalize on DMZ's stumbling. So again, Division content in general is about to have a big lull in these first few months of 2023, and DMZ, the new real big contender, is leaving survival fans with a lot to be desired. If that's not the perfect storm Heartland has going for it, then I don't know what is. The final question then becomes, given all of this information, when should Heartland then release? Now I want to preface with this. These days in gaming, there's no real good time to launch a game. There's always going to be some competition to worry about, but ultimately, you just have to go with something, as long as you're not incredibly idiotic like Titanfall 2. So that said, you're then looking at January, February, and March. I don't really think there's much of a chance of it still coming out in 2022 still, given we haven't heard anything about it. It's not impossible, but I'm just going to assume that it's not for now. So then looking at that lineup of games releasing in those first few months of 2023, I'll leave a link down below to a good breakdown that I found. February is by far the most cluttered, kind of similar to how it was in 2020 or earlier in 2022. Now again, there's always going to be stuff releasing. It's unavoidable. So if February just aligns well with Red Storm's timelines for whatever reason, I think they should do it. Screw Lightfall, screw Hogwarts Legacy, Dead Island 2, whatever. Capitalize on the Division lull and DMZ's loss of momentum if February is the most ideal. That said, I want to provide two sort of predictions here. Knowing Ubisoft and knowing the Division, I would guess the most likely time they would release it within this remaining fiscal 2022 window is March. Would it suck to wait that much longer? Yes, but hey, Division 2 still won't have much going on. It's as good a time as any. That said, Skull and Bones is set to come out on March 9th. That's obviously another big Ubisoft title. I don't know if they would necessarily want two big releases coinciding, so that could potentially be a determining factor. But I'd say mid to late March is most likely, just knowing Ubisoft. On the other hand, I actually think January makes the most sense here. Like as far as marketing, strategy, yada yada. I don't think Season 11 is coming until like early February, so Division fans will be clamoring for some new stuff. If DMZ really does fall flat, then all of that hype will have died down, and 2 months into Warzone 2 being out with its third-person mode, some of that initial hype will be dying down as well. Not to say that it won't be incredibly popular, it absolutely will be, but also just looking at the other games on the docket to release, nothing major sticks out to me as huge competition for Heartland as far as genres or other similarities. You're also then coming off of the holidays. What better time to release a hot new free-to-play game when everybody has just spent all their money on Christmas, kids are going back to school, the whole works. I just think January would be a really smart time to release this game. Again, within that remaining fiscal 2022 window, with the perfect storm Heartland's got brewing right now, it just makes sense to me. But again, we've had a lot of things make sense for Heartland before, and those haven't panned out, so we will just have to wait and see. And again, knowing Ubisoft, I would say late March is the most likely time frame for them to release this, but man, I really think the stars are aligning, and that mid-January would really be the perfect opportunity for this game to pop off into the market and make a big splash. So there you have it, Heartland, Red Storm, Ubisoft. We're desperate. We want Heartland, and the perfect storm is headed your way. Don't miss it. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you can be updated every time I upload. Let me know your thoughts on this discussion about Heartland's potential release window and the factors impacting it. Do you see this same perfect storm forming as I do? What do you think about DMZ's potential as a competitor in the survival genre? And when do you ultimately think Heartland will drop? Whatever your thoughts are on those or anything else we discussed, I will be anxious to read through your comments as always. And yeah, here's hoping we've got more Heartland news to talk about sooner rather than later. We were right about Ubisoft Forward, so we'll see. I've got high hopes. That's going to do it for me today, though, everybody. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.